questions. This is the evening session for us that are in the US on the West Coast. Those of you around the world, we developed this session so that if you're in Australia, you're getting a time where you could come in where you're not asleep. I know that some folks, like in Germany, would be at some 3 o'clock in the morning or something along those lines. So this is a great test, not only for those of you around the world, but for us to test other platforms like today we're using Vector, and other days we're using things like Ecamm Studio, and uh, in the future we'll be using ROS as well. We've got a great group of folks here on the panel that'll be showing us some of their skills and knowledge. So if for those of you watching in real time, you can jump in and put your questions in Mukana. And it looks like we got a couple coming in. Our reader today will be Alexander Knight, and let's go around the horn and say a little hello. Let's start off with Jeff.
Hey, welcome everybody. Glad to be here. I've got a little more extra time now that we're out of our production swing, our heaviest time of the year, and it's good to be here.
Nice. It's great to do a little production with you. Got a little tan down there in Florida, and thanks for the send off to San Diego, where I got a little more sun. Alexander up north of me probably hasn't seen too much sun. Alexander, you want to give a little shout out and a little plug on your show? I just got through watching the Mima Live one today, so yeah, give a little
thanks,
a little shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's good to be here, Guy. Good to see everybody in the evening. I am all caffeined out, so I'm prepped for the evening show, trying to get that energy back into my voice. Thank you. Yeah, it was fun interviewing Oliver on the show. I love that guy. It's just his amazing brain and knowledge and support for the community, and what everybody does here is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I got to actually spend a little time in a Tesla on a drive over to the ACM conference with him, so I got to learn a lot about how that software got developed. Maybe we'll have a little time later in the show to talk about it. But yeah, he was an Apple developer like 15 years ago, and Apple actually asked him to make that software. So he got a request because Apple sold a bunch of hardware. So that was a cool little insight to learn on that long journey from Monterey to Fresno. And we got Alex Lindsay as well. Alex, how you doing?
Hello. Doing well.
Double-header today.
I know, exactly. Very good. But it's been mostly just holed up. I'm spending most of my time right now. I'd like to say that I was doing lots of production, but at the moment I'm spending a lot of time in Airtable. so I've become an expert. I'm not an expert. I become I got my white belt now in Airtable. Like that's, I think that, I got a couple more colors to go, but I opened up a Google sheet the other day from somebody else, and I was like, "Oh, how do you live this way?" I used Google Sheets for 15 years, and it only took 6 months of. I mean, I've used Airtable in the past, but never at the level that I'm using it at now. And now I'm so used to changing everything all the time. I opened up Sheets, and I was like, "Oh, this is horrible! Like you don't have any access to any data. Like how does anyone do this?"
Well, you've been converted. I mean, that's what I love about this community and hearing things like this, because we're all used to using different things, and then something better comes along, and then we're like, "Hey, have you seen X?" And it's like, "Hey, tell us about X. Why is it better?"
Yeah, I mean, the downside of Airtable is that it's expensive. So you get very quickly into it's $25 a month per person, and then it's free for a little bit, but then it's very quickly $25 a person, and then very quickly, if you have a big team, it's $45 a person, because you start to you have all these features that they've been very good at pulling the features out that you would need to get to that next level. The advantage is that you can look at your data in so many different ways. So you don't think about a sheet. You have a raw database with all the stuff in it, but then you build different views of that database, and then you build interfaces. So the views are all like search by this and group by this and filter out these and put these in. And then the interfaces are just a little bit of information you want to show someone, that is like we have this thing where we have to put up drawings for something, and then a couple of different groups have to approve it. So the final candidate goes up, and then there's these little check marks, and then there's the final version of the drawing, once they've been approved. And so anyway, it's just a
So how would
that's
that have
all.
changed the day back in the days of Pixel Core with all those people flying all over the country?
It
How
would have been
would life have
it
been
would have been
different
life
with the
changing,
Airtable?
life changing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, now and we would have paid for it. I mean, easily to do what we're doing, because there's not that in Pixel Core we didn't have that many people editing it, but we had these core docs, and so in Pixel Core we had Google Docs, and there's a mixture of sheets and docs and everything else, and one show might have 16 or 20 different documents, and they weren't like pages on a sheet, or sheets. They were all different documents because we controlled who had access to what. So one area might be all the travel data that the folks doing logistics need. Another one is the build. Another one is the whatever. And we were very much only the people that need access to it get access to it. So each one of those documents had their own access levels. And then there was one core doc. And so you'd see a list of everything that was available, and you just click on it. If you were allowed to open it, you could open it. Otherwise, you'd get kicked out. So, but that would have been all one big Airtable, and it would have been
Yeah,
much
it reminds
easier.
me of NetSuite. So if you think that's Airtable is expensive, you should see NetSuite. We were paying $8,000 a month for NetSuite. But
Yeah.
talk about roles. If you had all access, you could go in and see all the financials. But the other thing is there was an audit trail, so you could always see if somebody changed something. And like my account
Yeah.
was like, how could you use QuickBooks if somebody could go in there and change something and you can make it go away essentially. And so there was always a danger at these bigger corporate numbers where it was just like you need that audit.
Yeah, and like there's some things that we've decided that we're not changing anymore inside of these documents, and so I locked it, and I'm the only one that can change it. Like you have to email me, but it can be just certain columns, So there's like just certain columns going down that no one can check that except for me. The rest of it, everyone can edit and do whatever, or I can set it to just different people that can. You can really get granular about. It's not like you have access to a sheet; you have access to cells, Like and I can let you have access or not access to those things. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's important that, I mean, for those of you that are listening that haven't had experience with this, to go on YouTube and just go watch some demos. Some of the software is super powerful. I bought Microsoft Project recently and was watching some of the tutorials, and then I bought Visio Pro. Luckily, I'm in Microsoft territory, so I have friends that work there and get the friends and family discount. So I was like, yeah, I might as well get Visio. And then you could actually pull in rack diagrams and individual pieces that are already pre-made stencils. And then when you want to make a legend, it gives you a legend of everything that you dragged and dropped in there. And I'm like, this is way different than OmniGraph. It's like, so again, when you get into these higher end softwares, because it's $600 for Visio Pro, and then it'll link to spreadsheets and dynamically change things in your diagram based on a spreadsheet. It's super powerful stuff. Jeff, have you seen any builds like that in Visio where people go to that extent where it's all got diagrams with databases?
I had a guy I worked with for a while that he was like really adamant in AutoCAD, and that's what he would take it to, like, oh, use an M4 screw here kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it was ridiculously overcomplicated. Just he did that because he felt like that was his way of getting his worth out of his designs. So I'm not that far. I mean, it's like I use a napkin sometimes, but I do like a good tool that allows me to get the detail in it if it's needed. And it depends if you're doing stuff for cities or other places that you might have too much detail in it that would take away from what you're trying to install too. And sometimes it's best to think those things out as you're assembling it a little bit too. So I'm kind of both ways on it.
Yeah, it's nice to know that the tools are out there because, when you're building something like a city council chamber or something and you need to do multiple cities and all of a sudden you're like, all right, when you run that report to how many you need to buy, it's like, okay, we need 50 M4 screws. We didn't know that we needed 50. This is how many might be, out of stock or something along those lines. So let's jump over to a couple of the questions. Let's take a look at that first one. What do we got, Alexander?
This first one's from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. For on-camera personalities, does the quality of their website affect your perception of their talent?
Jeff, go for it.
Not anymore. No, the website is probably the least of my worries of hiring talent. It would mostly be a reel or something that is real indicative of what they sound like, what they look like, how they are in a live environment. And then also I like to check with other people that have used them just to know this person might be a diva or you might not be, and those are things that weigh in a lot more than just a website.
Nice. Alex.
I usually don't even know if the actor has a website. Like, for on-camera personalities, I'm not, usually we're hiring people because they were recommended by somebody else, or, I have definitely, we have hosts, for instance, that we will go to over and over and over again because they're easy to use. They know what they're doing. So for us, there's like 4 or 5, so if you tell me you need a female host that knows comic books, I know some hosts for that. If you need someone that's going to interview stars, in front of something, I know someone to do that. And so we just kind of, if environmental, we know some other folks that do those ones, and we know that they are going to come in with a good kit. If they're going to be remote, if they're going to be in person, they're going to show up. They don't need a lot of coaching. They usually don't even need much teleprompting, but they can use a teleprompter if you give it to them. Those are the kind of folks that we're always looking for. And we just keep coming back to the same ones. And then if not, it's usually a client will tell us, well, this is what we want to use. I don't really care what their website looks like. I mean, I don't care. No, don't pay attention to it. Like, it's just, they're just the new person that showed up that we're now going to incorporate into the show.
Yeah, I remember in the old days of being in LA and having to do these cattle calls, and then the office would have all this talent coming in. I never looked at any of their websites. Somebody else did all that stuff pre-screen, and then they would drop in, and we would see how they read lines, and that's how they got chosen. Yeah. So I don't know how much things have changed.
Who knows of somebody that could do this thing, and it's still just very much a recommendation system, and it's what makes it sometimes hard to get in, but once you're in, it makes it easy to stay there as long as you keep on performing.
That's what I love about this community. I mean, giving people a chance that wouldn't normally have the chance, and then some of them really shine. Like we pull them out of the woodwork. I remember when Mickey first was kind of in the background, and he would turn on his camera, and then when he did turn on the camera, he was like in silhouette, and then we kind of coerced him out, and then the next thing you know, he's just a rock star in our world. He's helped so many of us with audio. It's amazing. I mean, just big heart, but also he has a day job and he knows his stuff. He's been out there doing Survivor and some of these reality TV shows.
I feel like Mickey is like 70 years old. I don't think that
he's
like,
Yoda.
He looks so young, but the knowledge in his head, I feel like he's gotta be,
I mean, 65, 66, 70.
Yeah. No, yeah, not a year older than 66. Yeah. It just feels like he's packed so much in, so much experience, because it's crazy.
It's like that Matrix thing. What's that helicopter B-52 whatever download?
Yeah, exactly. B212.
B212 download. So I think he's done a bunch of downloads, and he's got like all these manuals. Like I think he just got the PDF or some kind of 10x audio speed into his brain. It's like
there are things to
Dante.
One of the weird things about a Scorpio, the sound device of Scorpio, is that you have to go into this. You have to be in a channel, and then you have to like scroll down this weird part of the interface to get to the AES outputs, for if you're going to do the surround stuff that I do with the Scorpio. And I can never remember where it is, and it's not well documented. It's not in the manual, and it's like you can't find, or maybe it's somewhere in the manual, but it's like a line somewhere that I can't find. And so I can't find that output. And so usually you can always tell that I'm about to do something because I ping Mickey and I go, hey, where's that little thing again to do the AES output? And he's like, oh, just go down here and move this over and go down. And it's like a completely hidden thing that he has.
It's not like the olden days where they would just print it on the bottom. It says here, press HP plus switch to AES. So even this old little guy right here did AES out. But yeah. It's crazy how
the Scorpio's the
sound devices made that leap. Yeah, they made that leap, gigantic leap from the olden days. I don't know if they hired somebody new, but that leap to the mix pre-line, the Scorpio, and the 8, the 8 series in general, they're just monumental with the FPGAs and all the capabilities that they've added over the years. It's impressive.
I mean, I think in some ways I mean, it's always been pretty deep. I mean, when you really think about a 744 or 788, those had a lot of routing in them, that were built into the system that you could do. Most people didn't do any of the routing, but you could. And so they just kept on taking full advantage of it. But I think that a lot of the FPGA work, my understanding is it kind of started with the PIXs, PIX 240s, and so on and so forth, and they really got into the FPGA, and then really just kept running with it.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that the X32 is a decade old now, and I mean, it's still widely used, but all that capability, it's modern. I mean, Alexander, you got a new Yamaha DM3D. What all is in there that's new to the game? I mean, it's pretty much the same stuff, right? I mean, you got ins, you got outs, you got routing, you got.
That's true. I suppose.
Jeff's nodding his head.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose. But the Yamaha, the thing that I like about the Yamaha DM3 is that for this specific use case, it's too limiting to use it in production for a live band and for the type of production that I do. But I think for podcasts, for what I'm doing here, it's a perfect quality. But the preamps are nicer, and they're nicer than the older stuff. I mean, the TF series being around a long time, probably as long as the X32 line, but Yamaha has made improvements in the preamps. They make improvements in the converters, and that's really where you start to see these small differences really add up.
Yeah, I mean, if you go just into the Midas line, though, I mean, pre's from the 1960s still sound really good. I mean, there's some Neve stuff from way back in 60s, 70s that sound amazing still. But Jeff, I saw you kind of rolling the eyes, and what's your view
it's
on
about
that?
Usability. I think it's more about usability. So it's about how easy can you do the thing you need to do, and that's where the newer boards and the newer consoles should be excelling. They're not necessarily doing that, though. They are basically taking the same thing and just repackaging it and repackaging it and repackaging it, and so there's nothing like hugely new, I guess you would say, in audio in that low. It's just.
So you had in the truck a CL one? What did you have?
QL1. That was a QL1. So, and the major difference between the QL1 and the CL1 is the QL1 has 32 channels of Dante, and the CL can do a full 64 on a Dante chip. But that's pretty much the major differences. They also have a little bit different in the actual layout of the faders. I prefer the QL layout where you don't have a center group. The CLs have kind of like you got a bank over here, you got a center group, and then another bank over here on the bigger CL5s. But I prefer that the layout of just left
and
to right.
CLs don't have a lot of IO on the board, right? The CLs,
the
CLs
don't have near as much on the actual analog on the actual console itself.
Right.
Yeah, it is interesting though, because I heard recently that I was actually having a conversation about this on a recent show, I believe, about what's coming next. There's a DM3, there's a DM7, where's the 5, right? So something in the middle, somewhere in that 8 to 10, maybe at topside $12,000 range. It doesn't seem like it's coming. I saw something from a friend that went to some Yamaha sneak peek stuff, and it doesn't seem like that they're doing that. They're basically saying the DM7 compact is going to be their smaller board, and I feel like they're missing a market because there's nothing above the DM3. I need more channels than the DM3s, and I need more faders, preferably. But at the same time, it's really about the Dante channels is what I'm missing the most of the DMs. If it was all Dante and I could get a full 32, I could probably make a lot of things work with it. But the way they cut it down, I can't really use it very often.
So I wonder what the used market's going to look like as these things start to populate, as everybody switches over to DM7s and starts to move their older stuff. I thought that we would see like a precipitous drop last summer, but
I did too. And I thought the QLs and CLs would just start like flooding the market, but that's the things. It's like they are so reliable. They're not dying, even though they may be 10 years old. 8 to 10, I think, is what their product cycle was running. So even though they're that old, here's the thing too. So you think about it was a great board in 2020. whenever we hit COVID and everything, and we had such a shortage of processors and such a shortage of parts, being able to make it. I mean, they were behind for 2 years where they couldn't even
that was the whole ACAM fire, just eviscerated them.
And also a big part of that too is because Yamaha was in the whole Dante camp steadily. Like they chose that. Whenever Audinate says, we're not going to do Brooklyn 2s anymore. So that was another big thing that they had to retool and rebuild for the Brooklyn 3 chip. That was a shocker to them. And it's like, well, we have all our eggs in that basket. So unlike other consoles that could do MADI natively or could do with cards, bringing in and out different things, AES 67, there wasn't anything with the Yamaha line, that QL and CL line. There was nothing. So it just kind of died. But you think about it, it's 10 years old. I mean, it's still great hardware. They sound great. It's not like they're going to break, and the capabilities are still there that were there in the day one. And I just don't see anything in the DM7s that's really just bringing me, like forcing me to go that route or think that route. I would rather I built a Llama Mix system, and that's where I would rather put my energy.
So do you notice a snappiness difference, either of you guys?
Not at all.
Snappy. How?
With the DM7, the DM3 being just more modern pieces of hardware, are you noticing that when you go to push a button that it's instantly responsive versus the slower 6?
No, it's all about sound quality. It really comes down to. Now, I haven't used the QLs. They have other stuff planned. Like, for example, like the DM3 has no DCAs, no subgroups. That's a real bummer. I can live without DCAs. I really need subgroups. It only has one stereo matrix. I'm really hoping a firmware update will fix that.
All right, let's go to the next question.
From Robert Green in Los Angeles, what's the current day use for BOS?
Jeff.
It has been so long. I have no use for it at all. I mean, well, why? Robert's loading the question queue there. He was worried we weren't going to have enough. I think I would never use it.
Yeah, I remember back in the late 90s playing with it, installing it on like my OS 8 machine. It's a long time ago. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next question.
From Tony Mobley, are there any new users to the OBS alternative, Meld?
Alex.
I've seen it. And I think someone else has asked about, maybe it was Tony in the morning show, and kind of looked at it. But it looks like a simpler version in many ways to OBS. So I haven't really seen a reason to go down that path, I guess. So it, it looks interesting. It looks, again, like a much simpler version of OBS with just the stuff that you would need for gameplay or other things like that. It's got lots of little animations to it. And I think you're going to see more of these. But it hasn't, it looks nice and clean, but I haven't used it.
Yeah, there's another one to take a look at in the same vein, which is QuickLink. So QuickLink is based on OBS, and if you're looking at Meld, also take a look at QuickLink. It is a fee-based software application, but at NAB we'll be hearing more from this company. In fact, if you go to their website, you'll see that they made this big, huge hardware control panel with 4 Stream Decks, 432s. So it's all one big panel that they're selling, and they've been known in the market more abroad in the UK specifically for bringing in remote guests. So it'll be exciting to see what these guys wind up doing, another player in the market. Let's go to the next question.
This one's from me. For software-based switchers and layer-based systems like Mimo Live and other apps like VisVector, what's your Q&A process to verify any change you make has been done correctly without ill effect? I've been bitten a few times by changes in production.
You want to follow up on your question, Alex?
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with a series of steps and processes to verify no matter how small a change I do. And like last week I made a few what I thought were small changes to my layer sets in Memo Live. And, you know, very embarrassingly, and actually you mentioned, Guy, that episode that we did with Oliver, and somebody pointed out, and I fixed this issue about 20 minutes in. Every time I cut to a 2-up with Mitch and Oliver, Oliver couldn't be heard. And that's really bad. I can't fix that. Like I fixed it mid-show, but that's something because of a change that I made with the way audio source. It just basically the audio sources had turned off when I switched to that specific that layer set. And so now I've made some changes. So now I actually have over Dante the audio being fed from Memo going into my console, where I can actually monitor program audio as it's going out to make sure that all that stuff is actually working properly, and I can mute and unmute it. So that's the change that I made this week. But you know, those are things that, you know, hopefully you would think you would avoid by going through some checks and balances to make sure that you've done things correctly.
Yeah, Jeff.
In most of our sports, we call it faxing. So we're faxing this event. We go through every single input. So it's not a true finished fax until you do everything you would do as if you were live. So you go through every single input one at a time after another, and you would hopefully have somebody that's doing QCing on the outside that would be able to see past even transmission, for that matter. Granted, if you're doing it all in a one-man show, like you're describing, Alexander, I think that's the biggest challenge is being a little under staffed, I guess, or the way you look at it, under equipped in that part. But we go through every input. We check tally. We check comms on every person that's on a camera. Then we go to the MEs or the mix effects buses, every look that we're needing to pull up. And then there's always going to be a change. Granted, while you're live, it's the whole beauty of doing things live. So you may make changes then, and yeah, you could break it. But if you're building the show, the base of it, you should check every single look, every single option, every single input, and then also check if, like we were doing multiple outputs, we may see something going to a world feed. We may have something else going to a domestic partner, and then a different domestic partner. Those may have different graphics going to them. They may have different audio tracks going to them. So all of that QCing is just done methodically, one by one by one by one. It's the best way I can find to do it.
And Alex.
Yeah, and especially like in Memo Live, I've been in the same boat that you're in. The only thing that has been different was that, again, like what Jeff said, is that before the show, specifically with Memo Live, when we do them for Michael Krasny's show, while they're talking, I'm going through every site. I'm cycling through. They're just talking in Zoom, so they're just having a back and forth conversation, and I'm going through every single build that I have, and I'm listening to the program, and I'm actually listening to it on YouTube, like coming, the stream. So I have YouTube open now. It's a little dangerous to do that. I have it, obviously in a headphone, and I have it there, but I'm sitting there watching my. I'll stream the tricky part about this is that I will just watch the preview, which is for me always not quite streaming out. The problem is if you use the same key in YouTube, it doesn't always release that key immediately. So if you're doing like a test event, you start streaming the full thing with that key isn't valid. Like if you turn it off and immediately try to turn it back on again, you may not get a valid key. So you have to be kind of careful of that. But I'll listen to it in preview, make sure that I hear everything. I'm looking for the same thing, because the power of Memo is that you can set up all these layer sets, and you can go back and forth, and you abstract all this. It's very complex, but then you abstract all that complexity down to a keypad or an iPad, and then you're sitting there just tapping on, and that's a really powerful construct. The challenge with that is that you do get into these things where you accidentally have something that doesn't turn on, like you didn't click all the things that needed to be turned on, and so on and so forth. And so that is the thing I'm worried about all the time. Anytime I make a change to, and what I do is I copy every show. I copy the file. So I make a new file every single show that I do. So I have literally every gray matter that I've done. I have a file for that, mostly so that I can always go back to wherever I liked it. If I for some reason didn't do it, but I will say that it does take me a little bit of time. I do the same thing that Jeff's talking about with everything, but this one I also have test files. So I do a lot of things where we have to send stuff out to many locations at one time. And so we run test files, and we have people go into the venue, and there's a checklist for them, like you should hear 5.1 sound, and it describes what that looks like and sounds like. You should take a picture. You'll see a camera. We literally have, so that we can see the screens and know that we're not cut off. One of the files that I have it's a 16:9 screen, and at every 10 pixels is the resistor code going from the outside in. And the reason I do that is that if you take a picture of the screen, if you just take a picture of it, I can tell you within a couple pixels, but in a glance, I can say, oh, that you're cutting off 67 pixels off the bottom, because I can see at every 10. And generally, if you're cutting more than 100 pixels off of each side, you're really got some problems that we're not worried about. And we got to have a whole nother discussion. But I just have people take pictures and send them back to me. I have them check off that they saw 5.1. I have them check off that you'll see circles. Are the circles round? That's something I'd like to know, because I want to make sure that the anamorphic lens is not there. And so you'll see, there's things that I do at an angle. So that I said, do you see any aliasing along, do you see jagged edges? That's what it usually says, jagged edges along the edges. And I show pure colors. And so you have test signals that interrogate. It's not just that we go through all the steps, but we'll have a variety of different test signals that we use to interrogate the workflow, or interrogate the pipeline to make sure everything's still working.
Jeff, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I was going to echo exactly what Alex said. Is having a system set up so you have a specific test of both video output, so that you know exactly what it's supposed to look. We use something similar on our LED boards to know if we were seeing the whole image. So we'd put a little border around the outside, 1 pixel wide, and then if we couldn't see it, we knew something was wrong in one way or the other on how it was scaling. Then also same thing, it's always about the circle. If it's not a circle, then it's not right. Something's wrong. So that's the same test that we're doing. I'm developing some of that, those other tests like audio tracks, that because we're starting to do more and more multi-channel. And that was another thing when I was working with building out this llama mix thing that we're doing for a racing partner of ours. I needed a whole lot of audio channels, but I needed to know which ones were where. And that was the same kind of thing that I thought of you immediately, Alex, like one. That's all I want to hear. I just want to hear one, not the music playing or anything else. I just need to know that channel number so I can ISO it and know it's patched the right way. So all those little tools are all pieces, I guess, we all kind of collectively pick up as we go along.
And back over to you, Alex.
Yeah, and a lot of times we have to figure out things like 5.1 is a good example. Is the signal expecting 5 discrete or 6 discrete channels, or are those channels packed into a single track? And so we'll have those go right after each other to see if the system is reading those. So it's how you package all of those things up. And then there's other things that that are just hard to do. Like, so one of the things that we'll send down is a pathological SDI signal, which looks like kind of gray and pink, or gray and purple kind of thing. And it is the hardest thing to send to an SDI signal down an SDI path, and it stresses everything out so that you can see if there's anything that isn't working. For encoding, we have what we tend to call widowmakers, which is just a bunch of, like, I shoot a lot of ocean scenes. If I go to the beach, I'm going to shoot a bunch of stuff from the ocean at different frame rates. It's just whether it's my phone, or I usually take a camera with me. But I will. Shoot 60 frame, 24 frame, 29.97, like 120. I just grab all these things because you never know when I'm going to come back. But the advantage of oceans is that there's a whole bunch of stuff randomly moving. There's reflection, there's mist, there's sky, there's all kinds of, there's horizons, there's all kinds of things that are really hard to encode. And so we'll push those down the path as well to see what's going on. And then, of course, a lot of channel checkers where, like Jeff said, you go channel 1. For me, it's like left, right, center. And then LFE is like, and then left surround, right surround, and so you that way it's nice when you're doing the channel checking that people know they can look and see the speakers doing what they're supposed to do.
Man, great question and a lot of experience here. This is what I love about this community is that you guys sharing this knowledge that, I just don't want you to have to get the knife in the back that some of us have got. So if we could take away that knife, or sometimes you got to know when to leave the knife in. That's the other fun part of production is don't touch it. Don't mess anything. Don't just leave it. Just let's muscle our way through it. All right. You ready for the next question, Alexander?
This one's from Ray Maxwell in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. How would you do the sound for the Metallica immersive video for the Apple Vision Pro?
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah. So the sound was pretty good. I mean, I watched it a couple times because it's, so the new Metallica, there's about I think it's 20 minutes or 22-minute concert. So it's only a handful of songs. I think it's 3 or 4 songs and a couple little interviews and so on and so forth that they put out. And it's probably the best concert footage I've ever seen. I'm not, like it is, it was an entirely different experience. Is it perfect? No. There's a whole bunch of crowd shots that I could definitely throw away. There's a couple shots where they're too close to the folks. There's a couple shots that are too wide that, I don't know why they put them in there. So it's not like it's the perfect video, but it is better than anything else I've ever seen. So that's the kind of, and that's where the Vision Pro is really starting to, when you start to see these concerts, it's, and this is the first one that I felt like the other concerts so far that I've seen have been, they've been okay. And this one really took it to a whole nother level. They had, I think, 5 or 6 of immersive cameras that Apple built. And they've got them on wires. They've got them on, they've on steady cams. They have a lot of things that they really got aggressive about it. And so it's a pretty, I mean, if you have a Vision Pro or can go into a store and look at it, it's worth seeing. As far as the sound goes, it would be mixed the same way that any other surround mix would be done because you're delivering that back to the system. So most likely an Atmos mix, so that, you're going to get, typically you're going to get all the tracks that were recorded. And then that's going to be handed off to someone to build that surround mix for the using those tracks and placing them and moving them around, and deciding which ones are objects and which ones are beds. I'm going to guess that most of this was all beds. I don't think there's a lot of objects that they're moving around. Nothing was particularly aggressive. In fact, felt like a very tame mix as far as surround goes. So I didn't think it was something that jumped out. Like I didn't feel like sometimes when people really get aggressive, I know what I'm listening for. so I didn't really notice a lot that, but otherwise, as Mickey said here, it's just an Atmos mix. John Ross, who was has been on our show in the past. He does a lot of mixes like that. He did the Beyonce mix and the Taylor Swift mix. I actually don't know if he worked on this one or not. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But it's not anything different than any other Atmos mix for this.
Yeah, it's like peering into the future. You're already seeing it.
There are some things that they're not doing there that we took into account. So when we started doing the Ozo streams, we did some Ozo concerts, and we had tracking data on the band. So we had little markers and stuff like that. So we knew where they were in relationship to the camera. And so one of the things that we did that we weren't sure it would work, but it actually turned out to be really great, which is the mix changed with the cameras. So when we jumped because we realized there was this conversation at some point while we were doing it going, hey, if you're standing in a different part of your relationship to the musicians is different. And so we had a very quick transition. There was kind of figuring out, like, should we transition slowly? Should we go quickly? It turned out to be pretty quick. I think it was over about 15 frames. We would get to the other mix. And it was basically, we were in a QL5 with a GPIO connection to the switcher. So when they switched, it would just automatically move the scenes to the other surround mix. And it actually, Mickey said mixes like that would be distracting, and we thought it would be. Like again, there's definitely things that you think would be distracting, and we just didn't notice that it was that. We didn't do any radical changes either, but I think that we coached them that way. And the other thing is that one thing that happened with this one is that it was a pretty aggressive edit. It would have been impossible to do it. To Mickey's point, it would have driven everybody crazy. We took on a very slow edit because I really like, when I'm in immersive, I like to be able to look around. I like to look at things. I always feel like I'm being taken away from something too quickly. And so because of that, I think that it probably wasn't as distracting because we would let you sit. I mean, it's very rare for us to cut faster than 10 seconds. Like we're going to take you over and let you sit somewhere else for a little while and enjoy what you're looking at, and then we'll move you somewhere else. And
Yeah,
I
I
don't
can
know if that's
imagine that just getting fatiguing super quick if you're doing it wrong. You're obviously going to get feedback from your viewers, just
right.
like, I can't watch this. It's over the top. You're
Yeah,
cutting too quick. It's pulling me in and out of phase
you know,
essentially.
I think what's cool is that we're all kind of figuring out what works and doesn't work. Like
Yeah.
Apple, about half of everything that Apple's released so far is stuff that I wouldn't do, like their choices throughout the thing. But at the same time, to be fair, there are things that they're doing that I would never do that I was like, huh, that worked. like that was like they
Pushing the envelope.
have a Steadicam shot behind James as he walks up, as he walks under the stage and goes up. And it's just a shot that I just didn't think would work. Like I was like, I saw him doing it. And I was like, oh, that's not going to work. And I was like, oh, it's really nice, you know. And it was a really cool feel, like you're walking behind him as he's walking out on stage. And but you know, but then mixed into that were like audience shots that are really close in front of you and really uncomfortable. And you know, and so I think we're all still
That's
learning
part of this
what that
whole
medium
experience is. Yeah, if you're transporting the viewer to be there virtually, I mean, and you want their friends to hear about it too. I mean, you got to provide a great experience, and so pushing that envelope, but also knowing when to not be so aggressive, because you want them to get their money's
Yeah.
worth, so to speak. You know, that you don't.
It'll be interesting
you
to
wanna
see. It'll be what? Go ahead.
Yeah, you want to over deliver, not under deliver, or spasm out, because
It's
you
just
know, and some people will just
it's
even
hard.
get sick over if you push it too
Yeah,
hard.
it's hard to tell whether people would just get bored if you didn't do enough movement. You know, like on a stage like a Metallica stage, it's so big and it's so vast. It's not like you went to a bar and there's a 25-foot stage. It's like it's the whole, you know, this huge part of the grounds. You'd have to kind of cut around. But you know, we were talking about it on another, I think one of our other shows, is that I still would rather see the band. I've streamed the band a couple times, so I'm very familiar with their concerts, and I went to see the Fathom event, and I would rather see them. They used to rehearse in 3210 where we had the stage. I would have rather seen an immersive of them there, like lit up and put some stuff in there and made it very raw and had them do that. Like, to me, an immersive experience, I would have been really into that, you know, like, and so maybe they'll do that in the future. We'll see.
Exciting. All right, next question.
This one's from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What have been the best PTZ system innovations in the last few years, and are there any PTZ system innovations we hope to see next month at NAB?
Ooh, good question. Jeff.
I have played around with some PTZs from time to time, and I've always been just kind of addicted to them. I'll be honest with you. I use a lot of Mark Roberts motion control stuff because we bought into their higher end robotics. So it's the robotic head. So it's a pan tilt head with all the fanciness that comes with better robotics, better movement, better programmability, repeatability. So it's always going to go back to the spot that you tell it to go. And then they started adding in PTZs to that, and that really changed our workflows so much. We don't have any of the dedicated Panasonic or the dedicated Sony controllers anymore. It's just strictly all Mark Roberts, because I could use them on pretty much any camera that's out there. I could use the same control platforms for all those cameras, and it starts as little as like $2,500 is what their lowest end is for a single camera controller with the software and the server setup. And that's all it is. That's cheaper than a lot of, well, it's cheaper than a real, what I consider a real controller. Now, I don't consider the Superjoy or these other, I guess you'd call them, they're really just made for like security cameras. And that's where a lot of the low end PTZ stuff that's on the market, they're telling you it's a 4K camera. It's not. It's not a broadcast camera. It's just a security camera at that point. It may be 4K. That's fine. You call it whatever pixel count you want to, but it's not going to hold up next to, say, a Panasonic that's a $10,000 or $12,000 camera, or a Sony that's of equivalent price range, $10,000 to $12,000. That to me is more where the real broadcast cameras would be. Below that, maybe the $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 range. So with the Mark Roberts, they're working with both NDI, so you could use any camera that can talk by and be controlled by NDI. So you could use a lot of cameras in that method. But they also are developed specific ways of talking to like the Sony FR7 series, because it has a newer version of Visca. It's a little bit tweaked, a little bit better, but they wrote a specific module just for that camera. For my Panasonic UE150s and 160s, same thing. They have a specific module written just for that camera. So they get everything you could possibly get out of the cameras. Besides that, the way they are set up, they are not talking directly to the camera from the client. So the client, the software client itself, is talking to a server, then the server is talking to the camera. So it creates a very easy to duplicate and make a more larger type of production, or bring in more operators. You're not having to install and license a piece of software for every single person. You can actually do that very easy and create more of a distributed workflow, which is perfect for our applications whenever we're doing remote productions. And so I do know of a few things that are coming. So that's where I would make my recommendations, is stop by their booth.
Uh-oh.
They are
Come
part
on,
of
Jeff.
Red.
Come on, spill the beans.
Well, I said Red, and I probably shouldn't have, but Red was bought by Nikon or Nikon, depending on what side of the planet you're on. They were bought a while back, and now it's official, and there's some pretty cool stuff coming out with the robotics side.
Interesting, because yeah, at NAB I've always been fascinated with their demos with the Bolt and those Mark Roberts controls. So I'm excited to see what they come out with. Alex, you want to add to this question?
Yeah, the things that for my workflow, the things that has made the most difference on the PTZs. Of course, we've used a lot of different heads, not Mark Roberts heads, but telemetrics heads with a lot of established cameras. But the things that we've used recently have been telemetry on the Panasonic. So being able to have live telemetry going into Unreal Engine and being able to sync those up has been something that was important to us. And the Panasonics do that particularly well. They, as far as syncing that up, we're working on a bid for a show right now that has, it's a big budget, and but it's a fraction of the budget that it should be, like that it would be in the normal Hollywood world. And so we're looking at I've been hesitant to say, oh, we should just go down the path of green screen, but we may make one of the stages green screen, and that'll be tying completely back into, we got to be able to have the heads, tied into the backgrounds, pixel for pixel. And so that's been important. And then, now having a relatively compact, cost-effective full-frame sensor in the FR7 has really changed our workflows a lot. So being able to we do a lot of shows where we're doing, a bunch of FR7s. We're using more cameras than we did. We don't have less camera operators. We just have more cameras. So instead of having 3 camera operators, we've got 5. We've got 4 PTZs. We would normally have 2 camera operators and 1 fixed center. And instead we have 4 PTZs and 1 camera operator. And then that 1 camera operator that was there before goes back and runs a controller, or that's the other. It may not be the same person, but it's another. It doesn't reduce the head count, but it does make it. And being able to mix some FX6s, an FX6 with the FR7s, and have it all tied together for the sub 20-foot throw with those full frame sensors has been, man, this stuff looks good. It looks good on a big screen. Like, I put them on really big screens, and they look great. And so having that full frame and having it not be a science project, you just put it on a rig and hang it there. That's the advantage. And again, I owned 6 or 8 telemetrics heads with cameras and Cabrillo lenses and all that stuff, and we could definitely do it. But the buildup took a certain amount of time to make those work, and there was a certain amount of calibration. In this case, it's like we just turn them on, and we're off to the races. And so those two, the telemetry data and getting really good sensors on pre-built PTZs has been pretty useful for us.
Yeah, I've been paying a lot of attention to what Greg Gibson's been saying about his FR7s, and he's actually going to be a speaker at NAB for Sony regarding the FR7 and the new AM7 as well. The innovation that's occurred is one is the autofocus in the Sony world, where you can have a touch screen. So what he does is he puts 4 browser windows up, and he just has his operators touch the focus point. So it'll put a little bounding box on somebody's eyeball. So he's using the cream of the crop lenses because he's been shooting Sony for so long. He's not just using that Sony kit lens, which is sharp, but when you get into these $2,000 lenses that are, 1.4 or 1.2, 85 millimeter, you get a different look that you just can't get with a regular video camera. So I'd say the innovation of the autofocus, but on the AM7, what you're going to see more is just this really smooth auto tracking that they showed last year at Infocom. They didn't want to put it on the floor, so they took a few of us up to this secret room and showed the competitor shootout. But now I think this year they're going to go for the jugular, and I think they're going to really be showing the difference between auto tracking of the competitors and showing the difference of their technology. So, Jeff, you got something to say on this one?
I didn't even mention auto tracking. That was one of the reasons why I invested quite a bit into the Mark Roberts solution, was because of the auto tracking. There's just so many more variables whenever you can give the operator the auto tracking feature set in there. And just like Alex was saying, it's like, we're not doing less cameras. We're doing more cameras with the same amount of people, really. It's not that we're getting less people involved. Now, Greg, on the other hand, he is like one man or two man banding a lot of his stuff, but for the stuff he's shooting, it fits the role very well. I mean, he's got it dialed in. For me, in doing any kind of sporting events or bigger events that we're spread out and things like that, we still have to have people that can handle it. But I love the ability that's, just like I was talking with our mutual friend Doug Ferguson this morning, and he was asking me, say, "Hey, I need to rent a box lens. Who do I get a box lens from?" And all this, because he was going to be doing a graduation where he needed to be 200 feet back. I'm like, why don't you just put one of these better PTZs, say 20, 30 feet from the stage, put it on a pole, or hang it from if it's a Coliseum is where he's going to be, though. So it's like a 50-foot ceiling. It costs him more to hang it than it would be to get a lens. But that was one of the things I was like, it's just a pole. And they have flags and other things hanging up, that are going down for all the different school levels and things like that. So it was like, it probably wouldn't be that big a distraction. But in the end, it was just like, no, they just want a bigger lens. And so he's going to have to rent a big lens to do that. But I think rethinking, and that's one thing Greg has really excelled at, is rethinking how you're laying out. And again, what is the primary target of the broadcast? Is it an event you're broadcasting, or is it a broadcast event? And so how you sell it to your client, of which way you're actually, who's the priority, where's the priority, I think that's a choice also of what cameras you're using. And Mark Roberts also does the 3D also, and it sucks it out of the cameras and sends it right back out. So that's another tracking thing. Definitely stop by their booth. That's all I gotta say. Just stop by their booth. It's gonna be cool.
Yeah, one of the things about going to this Alliance for Community Media event in Fresno, where all the cable providers, public access cable providers met up, was hearing that, these are just tools at the end of the day. They're very nice, cool, sexy, sometimes very expensive tools, but what is the message that you're trying to convey? So I love the question, but it's just like, sometimes you got to circle back to, is this being distracting just for the sake of having the sharpest, the clearest, but sometimes it's just about, how do we get from point A to point B to point C to tell the story? If it's a graduation, if it's it was Jensen from NVIDIA that Greg was shooting, and I was so enamored by the technology that I forgot sometimes what Jensen was saying, because I was like, dang, that's shallow. Dang, that logo could be a little, the headroom's a little much with that logo.
I would say that we get caught up in that, but I do think that the average person watching, number one, doesn't notice a lot of those things, but they do feel it. Like when something feels cinematic, it feels more important to that person watching. They're not going to say, "Oh, look at that short depth of field," or that's an amazing frame, or whatever. But it has a certain feel to that makes it feel more important to them. And that's what a lot of times when you talk to folks that have been doing a lot of these kinds of events for a long time, they talk a lot less about the tech and a lot more about how people feel, and how are they going to feel when we do this? And those come down to just really the beats, but also the framing and again, the depth of field. And I find that people won't notice that I have a short depth of field, but the room feels really big, or it feels, or the show feels important because we're using larger sensor sizes. And it's a really subtle thing when you talk to folks.
Nice. All right. Next question.
This one's from me. Alex, have you experimented with automation at all in Mimo Live? I have a button that triggers the pre-show, which includes playback of a countdown. I don't see a way to automatically clear text overlay when the video finishes play out.
So when you're doing a countdown clock play out, like the clock is playing out over, let's say, a video or a still or whatever. Is that what you're doing there?
Yeah. So the countdown clock it's a ProRes file that is the countdown clock, and so it's playing back. It has all these animations, and basically right at the end, about 5 seconds before it hits the top of the hour, there's an animation, and there's like a little cutout for Mitch's head, and you can see him, and then it just goes full screen to him, but it still has there's text on screen that I'm overlaying for the episode number. And so right now what I'm doing is I have a button that I'm manually having to push to clear the text debris off the screen. But what I want is that when that video ends at a specific time, I want to say, get rid of all the screen debris. Anything that's overlaid in that layer, just get rid of it all.
Well, it would depend on whether I wanted to animate it off frame or whether I wanted to delete it. Like, or if I wanted to just turn it off. If I wanted to turn it off, you want to look at like force off, like is the play, to make, just turn it off. If I wanted to animate it, I would set another position for it that it goes to that's off screen. Like, so I would just say, I'm going to take this stuff and have it all I would just give it another place to be as another one of its positions. And just tell it to go from here to here. And I do that right now where I want to swing. Like, I have this thing at the beginning where Michael's talking, and he's talking, and then I want the other guy to slide in. I'm not using anything special. I just have that off screen, and I just animate it to slide in to that position, and I have Michael's squeeze down. So I'd probably hand animate that position to where I wanted it to go. That's probably how rather than tell it to do something, try to get it to do something automatic. Hopefully that helps.
Cool. Next question.
Okay, this one's from Steve Brenneman in Indianapolis. C-suite type is good on a standard Zoom call, but leading his first full-scale remote event with Pro Host. Would you offer him training / use of Wacom Cintiq 16-inch for a show that references land plots for a building project?
Alex Lindsay.
If you have time to let him do it, I would absolutely recommend it. So you got to figure out how you want to set that up. Of course, you can reach out to me in Discord or to use the one that I use. Of course, if you're using an iPad, depending on what your process is, there's also Video Pencil. So that's another one to look at on the iPad. Again, mine's on a computer with a Wacom tablet to make that actually happen. We have used it with C-Suite. They actually use it more. We had a situation where we were doing it with C-Suite, and then we also had art directors and so on and so forth. The art directors didn't like it, didn't have enough whatever that they wanted. The C-Suite and the CFO loved it. They could finally circle things and talk about things on Excel, and it will make a much better show. Like whatever you use to do a draw over of those things, whether it's Photoshop or our software or whatever, it revolutionizes when you want to interactively talk about something. They just have to have enough time to understand how it works, and you should have keystroke power on the back end to clear it. That's the big problem, is they'll be like, oh, I don't know how to clear it. And so I would highly recommend it. It's the reason I built it.
And let's go ahead and jump over to the content picks. I know, Alex, you're short on time, so I wanted to give you a chance to, before we hit that top of the hour, to give you yours. Do you have one selected already?
Yeah. So I still play the same game. I figured I'd give it a content. There's a thing called Kingdom Rush. No, I'm just going to do it. Just one. Kingdom Rush. It's what I play. It's the only game I play. And so I realized, I don't know if I've ever, maybe I mentioned it years ago, but it's a really fun game. It's what we call desktop tower defense. It's all I play. I only play desktop tower defense, and I only play this one game, and I play it about once a day. And so anyway, Kingdom Rush, get the original one. The other ones are not fun, in my opinion, but I actually only play one level on that game. So it's one game, one level, and I just play it once a day. And so anyway, there's my content pick.
Wow, surprise. Now we know a little inside peek into Alex's head.
I usually do it while I'm on the bike, because it makes the bike palatable. Yeah, so it takes about 25 minutes to play one level for me, and And so I sit there and I bike away in the morning. It's my morning routine.
Gonna have to give that one a whirl. All right, Alexander, you got one?
I do. I'm currently sucked into this new Apple TV series called Lioness. So that's what I'm watching right now. I just started season 2, and I'm really enjoying it. If you're into that kind of stuff with espionage and all that sort of stuff, lots of action. It's pretty compelling.
Yeah, I love that show as well. I think I watched all of them. I went on a binge a couple days where I'd watch 2 or 3 in a row and burn through them all. It's a great series. Jeff Keithley, what do you got?
I have been so busy lately. I haven't had any time to consume content. Barely ever pay attention whenever my wife and I are picking out something to watch. I just don't. I really kind of I don't know, go backwards. I really haven't been watching any produced content. The last thing we watched over the weekend was Reacher. We've kind of talked a little bit about that. So it's the Reacher series, and I am kind of enjoying that. It's amazing to see some of the production quality in some of these shows. There was a question that we didn't get to about Daredevil, and that was such a disappointment. The reboot of that, just such a disappointment. I turned it off like 30 minutes in it. I'm like, never mind. I won't be back.
Bummer. All right. I'll go for the one that I picked. This isn't like a crazy production value. I like it just because it's the Vietnam series on Apple TV, The War That Changed America. It's just fascinating because they actually went through and found the people that were still alive that they could interview. So they went back, and it's fascinating to see these guys that were 18 or 20, and then now they're 70 or so. And it's fascinating because my father was in Vietnam, and I was actually born on April 29th, 1975, the day that Saigon fell. So it's kind of interesting to watch all this stuff, and I'm on to the final episodes to see how it all unfolded. And I've always wanted to do some shoots like that where either World War II veterans or something along those lines, just to capture those memories, because when some of those vets are gone, that story's gone too. So I always thought it was a nice thing to be able to go and capture those for their family, or just for history's sake. And this has reminded me of that. And so with that, I want to thank the back end crew, Taylor and Peter and Jeff Keithley actually is on the panel, plus in the back end. And I think I saw a couple of Discords that Jonas was trying to lend a hand in there as well. So whoever else is back there that I may have missed, thank you very much for being able to push this forward. I know that there's little things here and there that pop up, and that's what we're doing here, is we're pushing this ball forward. I know that Viz just released this update with the new Zoom integration. So I think we were trying a little of that today. Is that right, Jeff? Did we use some Zoom integration, or was it Zoom Rooms?
We're simultaneously switching both 2 shows. So on one of them is I'm actually monitoring right here. This is the new. I can't really say what it is.
Can you show that?
It's a new interface. Sorry, I just realized what I pulled up. But we are actually controlling the other. We're calling it the new vector. So the new vector does have Zoom integration in it now. So we can actually just suck the participants directly out of the meeting and put them in as inputs, which is working fantastic. And so we're looking forward to hopefully putting that into full use next week. But it's gone very well, and we haven't seen any problems on this other thing either. So yeah, good things.
Looking forward to NAB to see those super secret things. And then also I can see that we also had Robert and Alan on the back end crew. So thanks, you guys. And for those of you that haven't volunteered, this is a great opportunity to experiment with these shows and see what it's like to control something that is pretty high end, and the differences between vMix and some of the other solutions out there on the market like Mimo. And I love that Alexander's using Mimo, and we're just eating our own dog food here, because that's what it's about. Is we're going to take some arrows in the back so you guys don't have to. We'll help figure it out for you, but if you can lend a hand, we'd love to have you. So again, that wraps up this episode, and hope to see you guys in the morning. For those of you that didn't get your question answered, go ahead and save it for next week, or we'll push you back, or you can send it into office hours in the morning show, and we'll see you there at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Thanks again.